GM. GM. Tuesday, 6th of Feb. Let's do daily levels. So, first of all, Solana is down. The jokes write themselves. To be honest, Solana used to have a lot of problems with the chain going down back in 2020, 2021. And I mean, the fact it's down again is probably not really a massive problem unless it becomes a persistent issue. Hasn't been down for almost a year, which for Solana itself is good, right? As in uh, the development, they've been a lot worse in the past, and this is like an improvement. So obviously, you don't want your chain going down, and eventually, it needs to get to a point where there's no downtime. But overall, I wouldn't say this is a massive cause for concern. It's going to give the ETH maxis a chance to shit on Solana. Yeah, well deserved if it happens, for sure. Um, as for price, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't do anything. If you see an overreaction, which we haven't seen, if you saw an overreaction and went drop down to 85 or down to 80, that'd be a buying opportunity to me. But as price is holding up pretty steady, I don't see this as being much. There'll be a bit of FUD circulating. People will be shitting on them. The Solana maxis will try and say it wasn't an outage. It was what did they say in the article? Performance degradation. That's the chain's gone down. So let them meme. Let them meme. So back to more important matters. Bitcoin looking good here. What I'm looking at next is this. So consolidating nicely up at the 50 EMA after having reclaimed it and having reclaimed the daily bands. Now, you know from uh, times I've talked about trending markets and how trends develop. Once you lose the daily uptrend and then it goes red and then it goes green, this doesn't mean it's back in an uptrend yet. It's potentially an early sign that we're reclaiming the trend. But quite often it just leads to choppy price action up and down. So that doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to the moon. And however, if you want to be a bear and you want to get short, you certainly don't want to be doing it while it's above moving averages, key levels, right? You want to be shorting something that is trending down and retesting the bands. Like, for example, when you're getting long, when you flip the 50, you fake out below it, you reclaim it. That's when you get long, right? And the whole long happens. You come back and you retest it, you get long. Whenever we lost the 50, some people would have shorted and they were right for a few days and then they were wrong. If it's going to come back to that level where shorts are on the table or downside moves, further downside moves are coming, it's not going to come from here. Yeah, it's going to have to be below that at the bare minimum. So anything happening above there to me is just early stage recovery, and I think that still the most likely direction is up. We got through Monday. Monday finished green after all the fucking bearishness and how bad it felt. Just because if you're too zoomed in on Twitter, you'll see that there was a nice rally on Monday, but then it just retraced the whole thing in a typical kind of mean reverting move, and people lost their minds. Now we've got price just consolidating, and I don't know. It depends a bit on if ETF flows are really bearish this week, and there's a lot of selling for whatever reason, or an absence of buying. You could see us go a bit lower, but I don't think that's going to be a catalyst to take us to 40k even. The big thing for me was Powell came out in his press conference last week, and the market expectations changed quite rapidly to not expect any rate cuts in March. And the market took this to be bearish. At least that was the supposed intention. And you can see the US bond yields spiked off it, and the dollar spiked as well. So what you would expect when yields do this, I'll go to the 1 hour chart and we'll put them all together from Friday, which is where over here. Sorry, Wednesday. You'll see. All right. Here's the dollar, Bitcoin, and bond yields. So on Wednesday leading into the FOMC, we saw yields bottom out, and then they've one way up only since then. We saw the dollar bottom out, one way up only since then. Both of those should be negative for Bitcoin. Right? Dollar up, bond yields up, should be negative for Bitcoin and negative for gold. Gold is sort of kind of chopping sideways, slightly weak as well. But Bitcoin has really held up much better than you would expect. Again, doesn't mean like it's out of the woods yet necessarily, but bears do not have time on their side, not in a bull market. And so how can the dollar go on this sustained rally for 3 or 4 days? How can yields go on this sustained rally for going into now the fourth day? And Bitcoin stay steady in its range at this level where it's holding up in an area that should be really strong resistance, right? That point of control from all of the move up, that should be a big resistance. But price consolidating in an area doesn't tell me that it's resistance. Resistance you're supposed to reject off, not trade within. So to me, Bitcoin is filling that gap in. And while it can go lower, and I do still expect at some point we sweep down to 40, the way I view it is, if the market wasn't able to sell off even below this 50 EMA for Bitcoin, if the market wasn't able to break that with all the bad news last week, right, the delay of rate hikes, etc., rate cuts, sorry, supposed bad news, like I said, I said I don't believe it on Wednesday. I don't believe that Powell actually said that they weren't going to cut. He said it's not their base case, but the end result is the same. Cuts are coming. And so, it's funny. I've been watching sentiment online. I've been watching positioning. Bears were doing victory laps as if this was really bad, but price hasn't moved. And to me, I think we go up. All else being equal, I think price goes up. This weekend is Super Bowl and Chinese New Year. Why does Super Bowl matter? Well, you could expect Bitcoin ads at the Super Bowl, at least one. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I'll be very surprised if one of them doesn't do it. Chinese New Year, that's probably the bigger actual direct effect, especially because Chinese government and central bank are easing, so they're printing money, they're supporting the markets, and they're talking very dovishly as well. This is actually very common that there tends to be a lot of easing. So the way China works is obviously our calendar New Year is January 1st. Theirs goes by the Lunar New Year, which is in this year. It's in February, this weekend, this Saturday. And historical trends are not predictive of the future, but China tends to start the year very, very hawkish and quite bearish in January. And then the closer you get to Chinese New Year, they start to be a lot more dovish and a lot more supportive of the markets and stimulative. And they're following the exact same path this year. Chinese stocks actually went up finally for the first time in fucking what seems like forever. So a big reversal. Well, not you can't call this a reversal yet. It actually looks like ETH BTC, which is kind of funny. It looks exactly like ETH BTC. ETH BTC is a CCP asset confirmed, but it's an attempt at a reversal. People are very dismissive of China now because a bit like ETH BTC, every time it bounces, it retraces and bounces and retraces and bounces and retraces. But obviously, eventually, one of those bounces will be the bottom. And so, while that doesn't necessarily have to directly mean much for crypto, if China's not falling apart completely and they manage to rescue their economy by stimulating, it's obviously going to be good for the global economy because China's the second largest economy. They trade with every country. A proper collapse in China, it's hard to see how that wouldn't have some negative effects across the rest of the world because of contagion. Because, the money in China, right, the investors, all the debt, it doesn't just, it's not just contained to China. They have assets and liabilities all across the world. So, all in all, better if they rescue it. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, to have a rally in the week of Chinese New Year, totally, totally, totally normal. And I would expect this is the bottom for a while. How high it goes, how far it goes, nobody knows. But I think it's the start of something, not the end. And as for the markets themselves, total three, it's still just consolidating sideways. So again, alts are not really getting ahead of themselves too much. You do have some alts, like you got Link performing quite well. You got IMX, I know it's pretty good, decent, right? But still, just within a consolidation. You had BitTensor before, which is well, actually still really strong. BitTensor's a nice breakout there. As for me with BitTensor, I've still no change. I'm not going to touch it here. I'm going to wait for whatever consolidation comes next. Render played out the Apple Vision Pro rally. I think now it can set up consolidation in here. And overall, I think the market's not, it's certainly not overheated. It's certainly not like toppy. Uh, it's not up only bull market or anything like just yet. I still think, again, which has been the case for a while, I think we are stuck in this trap. As soon as we close a weekly above this 1.65, I expect that is the market signaling that we're following the green path. Yeah, there we go. I knew I drew a couple. If we just start to slowly grind higher on the total cap, I think that's the bottom's in. I don't think we're going to bounce up to here and then go lower. I think if we're going to go lower, it's going to come from here, like the red path. We push down a bit lower and maybe fill in some of this gap, drop down a bit back towards the breakout level or whatever. But as of right now, not too much, that really concerns me. And staying long, spot long, is the only rational choice here. I think when you zoom out and you remember that this is the beginning, not the end, just stay spot long. Doesn't mean that everything's going to moon right away. Tactical trading around that. There's not that much that's trending cleanly. So, this is the phase for me. This is the phase of the market where you take a lot of, either you don't trade, right? Or you take a lot of entries and take a lot of stop losses, but not full stops. I mean, like enter, cut a break even, enter, cut at a small loss, enter, cut at a small profit. So if you're a more experienced trader, at least that's how you should be approaching it. You should have your early invalidations because the time for just getting long stuff and waiting and it'll eventually break out. That was October, November, December. It doesn't usually, that kind of phase doesn't follow with the exact same phase again typically. So that's how I'm approaching it. I'm waiting for trades to line up. I don't see much yet that really gets me interested. But once we see some moves back down and supports getting confirmed, I'll be keen to get long. But Bitcoin itself for me is the one. So we had a little bit of a sell off this morning just before I started recording. To me, that just looks like here, right? As price went chop sideways, we saw quite a sharp increase of open interest. So I think after the rally up this morning, people were just longing the top. And so they've got flushed out. And now we just need to wait and see where it goes. This is all just happening kind of within the context of a wider range. And I would wait and see where price goes next. I don't know. I just don't see a clear case for a breakdown or a breakout at this point. When price is compressing like this, and it's just getting compressed into a tight, even if you draw it across here, You get the idea. It's making higher lows, but it's also making lower highs. That's just a sign that the market's compressing and consolidating and waiting for a break. So right here is the worst place to bet. If you're like, it's going to break down, but it can go down to there and go to there and then go down. Oh, it's going to pump. Yeah, but it can pump up and then down and then up. So usually you want to wait for that something more clear to come. I think, if anything, it's more likely that we grind higher, because currently the thing that matters more are the higher lows to me. That's an indication that price is getting supported on the way up. And given that we're already in an early uptrend here, I think the continuation is more likely. Right? If you have an impulse higher and a compression, you would expect, all else being equal, you expect continuation. But at the same time, the market's not exactly full of life, so you don't have to be. You don't want to put your opinion into it too much. You want to, again, just be patient, have your levels. For me, the levels where I want to get really involved again is around this 40k level, if it fills in that gap. Or if I see a strong move up, then I'll be looking at bottom being in and waiting for the reaction. Doesn't mean that the bottom is in. You can always go up to 45, meet strong resistance, and go all the way back down. But I think that if price comes up here and just starts to chop around, when you start seeing this kind of thing where price just seems to keep grinding higher and higher and higher, I think then that's when the supply-demand imbalance eventually breaks. And as we get towards March and going into the halving, I think that's when we go up. I think bears are out of time already, to be honest. I'm long spot. I want 40k for another long. I'd like to see the early longs get flushed out into there and get long. But for spot holdings, yeah, I don't know if you're going to get a lower price. You might, but we did have the dip and we bought the dip. And that's what you're supposed to do in a bull market, is buy the dip, don't try and impose your will onto the market. I wouldn't be surprised with all the bad news. Time is really your best friend here as a bull. Time is a bear's worst enemy. There's been bad news after bad news after bad news. The ETF volumes are down. Nobody cares about them. Fed aren't going to cut rates in March. Bearish. Commercial real estate's collapsing. Bearish. China's stimulating and they can't even fucking pump the markets. Bearish. Everything's bearish, bearish, bearish. Yet, Bitcoin doesn't care. If you get loads of bearish news and price doesn't move, and we're already in an uptrend and we're in a bull market and we've the halving coming, to me that's just telling me that absorption is happening. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that this can't be distribution and maybe I'm wrong and it just flushes all the way back down. Sure, that can happen. But every day I wake up and do these videos, if Bitcoin just continues to be here, chopping around, when the news is bad, that's bullish. If Bitcoin was doing all this and there was good news after good news after good news, that's bad. But it's the opposite. Right? Everyone's trying to FUD the markets here to get lower entries. And so far, it's not working. But we'll see. So, that's it, GM. See you later on the live stream, 5 p.m. UTC. GM, GM, GM.